I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Thank you to this week's sponsor, Lend 360. Join them in Chicago, October 8th through 10th for their annual conference. Lend 360 is the must-attend event connecting every angle of the online lending industry. This week's big news is the SBA Inspector General released a report on another guarantee that they recommend for denial because of lender inadequate underwriting procedures. In the video, I made a mistake, and I did not fully explain that there were 3 ways SBA allows a lender to calculate cash flow. You can do it based on historical cash flow, one of 2 ways. You can either use the tax return, or you can use the financial statement, or you can base it upon projections. Listen to this exchange Lance Sexton and I had about this interesting case study.
This was a loan that was actually purchased by Herndon, and it went into an IPREA review, which is the False Payment Claims Act. We could spend an hour on this, but here are the significant takeaways. Number 1, SBA allows you to make a loan based on 3 things, Lance. You can either do it on past cash flow or projected cash flow. And in this situation, we have a borrower who is showing massive losses. They lost $220,000, but they then made money, then they lost money. The lender chose not to base the loan on past cash flow, but on projections, which, Lance, that is perfectly kosher, correct?
It is, but I think one of the things, Bob, that this story tells us is any set of projections needs a strong set of a summary of assumptions, a really strong set of assumptions that support the numbers. I mean, Bob, this one, it smells. It smells really bad.
Here's the poll question. This ties this all in. What the problem was is in the projections for this industry, the profit is, the RMA average for profit before tax is 2% of sales, but the projections are showing 30%. The underwriter did not analyze that. Quote, this was not a reasonable representation of the business profitability based on the lender's comparison to industry average. Lance, I think that's a fair criticism.
I think it's absolutely fair, Bob, because, okay, let's say the industry average is 2%, they're projecting 4%. Okay, that's a significant percentage difference, but they're not going to beat that up. But when you have, you know, a 15 times difference, you know, RMA says it's 2 and your projections say 30, they are going to have a problem with that. And I don't know a business that exists, Bob, that has a net income of 30%.
Back to what Lance is saying, restaurants say you're going to make 2% net profit. I have no issue with the underwriter saying, no, we think we can go 4, maybe 4.5. And why? Well, the owner is committed to be the cook. His wife is going to run the front door. And I think no one would criticize that. They say, well, are they really going to be both working 80 hours a week? But we know people who do that.
But Bob,
go ahead. I'll let you tell your story.
I'm sorry, run a quick scenario. You're talking about restaurants, and I apologize for interrupting you, Bob, but I get excited. I get excited.
No, I know.
But you take a restaurant. Bob and I did a restaurant webinar recently, and your average industry cost of food and labor is 67%. So let's shave that off. You got 33% left. The average cost of building in a restaurant is 15%. So now we're already down to 18%. So just 2 categories, you know, food, labor, and rent. And we're down to 18%. If you get a restaurant with a 30% sales net income projection, not going to happen. So it's, I think what that brings out, Bob, is RMA's a great way to check the reasonableness of your projections.
And let's go to the 3rd slide. And so what the lender said was we have $2 million in new sales. First year sales following the loan disbursement projected to be $2 million based on what? Based on contracts. They had verbal and repeated commitments from customers. However, the lender did not provide evidence of the orders of any of the contracts with the borrower's customer to verify this information. They only verified $100,000. They did not verify $1.9 million. So again, you're allowed to do that, but a prudent lender will say, okay, where's that $2 million coming from? Where are the contracts? And underwriting that process is, are we comfortable that the orders of this $1.92 million, that they have the financial wherewithal to complete that transaction?
Well, again, a great, and I want to throw a shout out to the small business development centers across America, guys. A great place to send your customers to get reasonable projections. And but I just think it's important for us to pay attention. We can't just accept it without a summary of assumptions that explain where the numbers came from.
In our weekly office hours, we always do a poll where we ask the participants to answer the question. This is an interesting discussion Lance and I had where we said, hey, what is the lender responsibility of performing a site visit when a loan goes delinquent?
Does SBA require a site visit when the loan hits 31 past due? And when we say 31 days, we're really also referring to 60 days on those reports. What do you think? Yes or no?
Well,
no, you don't get to answer until the poll results come
I think there's a lot of confusion about this.
Well, that's why I'm asking that, and I'm going to let you answer. Oh, look at that, 50-50. Lance, what is your...
The deal is, there's a lot of confusion about site visits because the only place, let's just talk about the servicing SOP. The only place the servicing SOP talks about a site visit requirement is when a loan becomes non-performing, either 60 days past due or an adverse event like a bankruptcy or litigation occurs. That's the only time. Now, the SOP 5010-5J, you need to do a site visit at the time of origination, but when you get into servicing, the only absolute site visit requirement is when it becomes non-performing, and like I said, SBA's definition is 60 days past due or more, or an adverse event happens.
However, as a prudent lender, Lance, are you going to wait till it hits 60 days?
You know, Bob, I've told this story a million times, and I'm going to give the Reader's Digest. Had a loan that was in liquidation that was supposed to be a Slotsky's. So I get my digital camera. It had never had a site visit, probably about 9 months past due. We put it in liquidation. I run out, Bob, and there's a Subway there. And I start clicking pictures of all the equipment and FF&E, and suddenly the man calls the police. The police officer comes up, puts his arm around me and says, "What are you doing?" And then I gave him my identification and explained, well, it was not the same owner, Bob. The Slotsky's had closed 6 months earlier, sold some of the FF&E, non-serial numbered, obviously to the Subway shop. Subway shop opened up. The borrower was nowhere to be found, but I almost got thrown in jail, Bob.
We would have bailed you out.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. The takeaway is we're at an all-time low or all-time high on loan performance, and there's only one place for it to go. Servicers, when you see those delinquencies start popping up, I don't wait for the 60 days. Go out and find out what is happening. And as Lance says, work with your borrower. There are great solutions in your toolkit, and a lot of borrowers, when they get in that situation, they get embarrassed and they get overwhelmed, and you have the solution, hopefully, to turn it around.
Bob, a poll question I want to ask next week, because this is near and dear to my heart, and I want to know what everybody else is doing is, and y'all think about this and come back next week. Does your bank, does the same person who brings the loan in service?
Lenders are leaving money on the table with their partner, SBA, when they fail to get a litigation plan approved. Remember, SBA as your partner will pick up that percentage share of all legal expenses as long as you obtain prior approval. Lance is an expert in this. Listen to what he and I had to say.
Have you prepared a litigation plan for one of your non-performing SBA loans that's submitted to SBA for approval? Lance, you keep asking this question over and over and over. What are you getting at?
Well, the problem you run into, the only way you're going to get reimbursed for litigation expenses is if you follow the appropriate servicing steps and getting a litigation plan approved. Not all litigation plans have to be approved by SBA, but I think it's important for us to note, I see participant banks all the time, Bob, they'll foreclose on something, spend $12,000 in legal expenses, and then send that in as a reimbursable expense to SBA, and they get declined because that litigation plan had to be approved.
And that is a great takeaway. You need to get these approved. You're leaving money on the table. Remember, the guarantee flows through unpaid interest for 90 days, 120 days?
120 days, Bob.
120 days. So if you have a delinquent loan for 4 months, you get that interest. Plus, SBA as a partner will pick up their share of those litigation expenses and get that done.
Absolutely, Bob. And not to try to sell our participants on a webinar, but next Wednesday we're going to have a webinar that talks about litigation plans.
Last year, we instituted the Coleman SBA Lender Awards. It's time to do that again for 2018. Hey, take a look at this list, and you may want to very well consider nominating some of your worthy employees.
Let me give you a pro tip. There's two things that judges are looking for. We want a strong testimonial from a department manager, someone in the C-suite. But more important, we want a great case study, just about one situation where there was a successful outcome that you initiated or how you solved a problem. We want those strong stories, and we want a testimonial. Those are the two things that are going to make this work for you.
Finally, we continue our series with our America West videos. Great conversation with Ken Rosenthal of CDC Capital Markets. We're talking with Ken Rosenthal.
How's it?
Founder, steering committee, facilitator, sponsor, exhibitor. At least it doesn't say in memoriam. So.
No, I'm really important apparently.
Tell me what you do.
What do? I make people happy. I enhance people's lives through physical and fiscal fitness.
Yeah, that's really great. But how do you make money?
I represent Morgan Stanley on the SBA 504 wholesale first mortgage, the 504 market.
Which means?
So, long story short, I work for CDC Small Business Finance, which is the largest CDC in the country. We are 504 second mortgage lenders in California, Arizona, Nevada. And then I've been doing that for 20 years. And then for the last 8 years, put those two together, that's 28. 28 years working for the same company. For the last 8 years, we have a division that we started called CDC Capital Markets. And what that does is represents Morgan Stanley, kind of like a loan service provider would for a bank. So we do all the marketing, packaging, underwriting, funding, and servicing for Morgan Stanley nationwide for the SBA 504 first mortgage on a wholesale basis.
Awesome. Ken, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today for the Coleman Report Update and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.